you here earlier? Okay. Wow, we've been talking about data all day and what we've been getting out of it. We've been getting a lot out of it, and we've been working really hard, and it's been a hard road. I can tell you since I started, there wasn't anybody doing anything, nobody could help me, tell me what to do. I did it all by myself. And to hear you say that, what we're getting out of it is very slow progress, and we can't discourage each other by questioning whether we're getting anything. I don't know if you can hear me, but can you? Okay. So I think what we have to do is be a little bit more cohesive and united about where we need to go and focus. I think people need to stand up and demand, don't question, demand that we have a seat at the table. And that's community-based organizations, other investigators. Every time anyone hears me speak, they hear me speak about what we're talking about, that we're not visible, that we get overlooked, that people don't pay attention to our experience, that it's not included in research. And if we don't speak out for it, if we don't stand up, and you don't have to be black to do it. Anybody can say, how could you, who've never lived it, don't know anybody, don't have better friends, and you're going to study a group? This is a large national study that actually was funded to do this. And other ones are being funded right now, and we're being added on as consultants. I wouldn't ever be a consultant on a grant. Don't get me started. Unless I sit at the table as a principal investigator, I would never consult on somebody else's project. They can listen to you and dismiss you. Either they're going to integrate what I know in my experience and expertise, or they're not going to use me as window dressing. And I think we have to stand up to that. I think what we want to do in this conference is to tell people, don't be afraid to say what you need to say, because we don't have time to be window dressing. But we are making progress. We are coming up with very significant findings. We've been presenting them all day. Give the people credit who did that today. Let's not discourage them to come to press. We have a fabulous day tomorrow. We're going to learn some more. We just need to be more activists about it. And we need to be loud about it. And I think someone said, we have no act up in the black community. You act up, you're in jail. Okay? So we need a way of getting our voices out. This is an intellectual way of getting our voices out. We could have done it another way. We could have said, come down to City Hall and march with us. We'll all be in jail together. But what we want to do is to publish, and we want to make a difference. So we need you to understand we are doing something. This is important. We are making progress, okay? Is everyone with me on that? We are making progress. Let's not go backwards to doubt that we need to stay home, doubt, not participate, lie on surveys and all that. We've been there and done that. We need to move forward, articulate what our experience is, and demand that it be included. It is important and it will be there.
So I just wanted to add a couple comments, and I agree very much with what Dr. Wyatt was saying. And along those lines, there really has been a tremendous shift in the last 15 years in the number of black people who are doing HIV research. I mean, I remember as part of my pre-doctoral fellowship, they had extra money. You know, some people actually have extra money on their grants in certain years. And so they sent us around to HIV research centers, and we went to Centers for Disease Control, and we went to CAPS, and we went to the Care Center in Milwaukee. I think we went to one other one. And then we were supposed to write a reflection paper when we came back. And I wrote this reflection paper on why all these people were doing research on people of color, because almost every study that was talked about was about blacks. There were a few about Latinos, a few about MSM as a general group, and I saw one black person who was like a high-level researcher in that entire tour. Around a few years later, after that, I was at a university, it's now CHRP, California HIV/AIDS Research Program Conference. They had a meeting in San Diego. Actually, I wasn't there. Colleagues came back, white colleagues from the health department came back and were like, there were no black people there. It has really changed tremendously in the last 15 years. People like, I mean, when, oh my God, you gave this brilliant talk and you just blanked on your name. Daryl Wheeler. When Dr. Wheeler talked earlier about the isolation he's felt and being among the oldest people in the, in terms of career-wise and age-wise doing this work, it's true. There were very few people like him. I mean, I'm beginning to feel relatively old in this whole framework of things too, but it has really changed. Just the number of people who are on this program. Many of us were just in New York. There's a whole cadre of black researchers that are coming up. And but the last point I want to make is something, goes back to something that he said, which is research with a plantation mentality, because I think that's really the most important part, not just that you color match the people who are doing the work or everything like that. It's the consciousness that people bring to the work. And as somebody who's a research participant or a head of a community-based organization or a leader in the community, you have a right to ask those questions and try to understand what is the consciousness behind the work. And that's, to me, the most important question when you're trying to talk about who it is that you might partner with and think about it. So you really have potentially, you have some power in that frame, in that work.
I guess just a few comments. Excuse me. So I heard something earlier on, I'm not sure where this was going, but I don't have to be a woman to fight for, to be a feminist. And I don't have to be gay to fight for gay rights. And this big issue of, or this big notion that, you know, us as a people need to unite around blackness in order to fight for equal rights is sort of problematic, because you could be a heterosexual black man and understand that brothers who are gay are struggling and try, in order to find their place or their rightful existence in our society, and help to fight for their rights too as well. And I think to separate yourself and to say that, you know, as let's unite around blackness is problematic, because it also negates my other identity. And we need to talk about that some more.
And one of the things I want to say, and Ms. Wafford, I think perpetuating wrong information disturbs me. I read an article that you sent out on your email saying that black women are more infected by down low men. That's not true. And there's no studies that prove that. And that was very disturbing to me. It was an article that you sent out your little list. Yes. I wish I could find it, but it was a meeting you had in Los Angeles, and that's one of the statements you made. And if we continue to perpetuate incorrect information, that's fueling it too. There's no research, and Dr. Wheeler can back me up, and Melvin, there's no research to show that black men on the down low are infecting women. That's not true.
Brother, I don't even use the term down low. I despise that term.
Oh, okay. All right. So I wish I could find the article, because I remember saying it, and it disturbed me. I was going to write you an email. But just as long as we're on the same page, we're fine.
I never even use that term, brother.
Okay.
Disrespectful of black people. Because if I say down low, that's what you think is black. You don't think anybody else. So there's no way in the world I would ever dream of calling another brother down low. So it must be somebody look like me.
It's on. I don't know why this is not picking up, is around sustainability. And I want to take us back to what you were initially setting up, talking about the tensions between community-based organizations, community individuals, and researchers. And I think a lot of times we don't take enough time to really think about how research or even research-oriented projects are received within the community. And to the point where research starts to commodify behaviors, I think we need to step back and look at kind of the end result. And we're kind of culminating in this conversation around what we want the end result to be of our research. So we want there to be some kind of structural or systemic change that comes as a result of the findings that we're able to accumulate and report back to the community. And Dr. Wheeler talked about it a little bit earlier in disseminating the research findings and how that actually manifests itself in terms of individual behavioral change or structural or community level change in our communities. And at the same time, we know that when we do research in our community, oftentimes the only reason that we're able to bring people in is because there's incentives, there's giveaways, and there's other things that really bring people into the research project. But what happens after the research project ends? And more importantly, as we talked about earlier, a lot of times there is a need in the community, but oftentimes the way to fill that need within the community is through a research project, and then the research project goes away, and then the service goes away, and then the community is left there with this even more exposed need, and they really don't have any access to really work on really a sustainable mechanism for providing for that need. So I said all of that to come to my question, which is how do we take more of what we're learning in the research and then bring it into the programmatic application process or into the service delivery and building process in a more meaningful way that results in wholesale structural and systemic change from the community-based organization all the way through the Research One institutions that manifest themselves in a continuum of interdisciplinary and sustainable care that individuals in every community can access.
That's such a wonderful question, and I think Dr. Bailey had begun to address that too in terms of, he talked about his role as a researcher in houseball communities, right? And some of the research that he's done. And he also talked about being quote unquote aged out, but the work doesn't stop, right? So he talked about, well, let's engage community-based participatory research in a more thoughtful and a more meaningful way. So one of the ways that he talked about in terms of his positionality as a researcher is that I'm also serving as an advocate, right? So I'm also using power in a certain way that benefits a specific community, which in his case is a houseball communities, right? So I think that's important, but it goes back to, I think, what Dr. Wheeler was raising earlier in terms of what's the purpose of research? Why are we doing this? Is it just to publish a paper? Right, which is important in terms of advancing scientific knowledge. We don't want to dismiss that, but at the same time, how are communities benefiting, you know, from the research that's happening? And that's the question that I'm hearing, which is important. So in terms of how we see ourselves as researchers, I think we do need to interrogate that in terms of our positionalities, in terms of how we see ourselves, you know, why are we conducting the research? And that's a part of the community-based participatory research process too. And to have a true, you know, we had talked about this, I think, at the last conference, but to have a true community-based participatory research it's a very engaged, long-standing process. So is the research effectively ever, you know, ended or completed? So it's really about, I would, you know, engage your question and say that it's about, you know, the betterment of our communities and really trying to push for systemic change and structural change in terms of really the betterment of communities and beginning to address some of those issues and some of those core questions. Okay, so we'll have a brief, no more questions? Oh, okay. So some closing remarks from our two panelists.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. I think sometimes we get caught up and we think that we're just going over it and talking about the same things over and over and over. But I think the reality of it is as long as we're talking, we're making progress. I agree with you, Gail. We are making progress. We're not sitting still. And we're going to have to keep doing it until we put an end to it. So thank you.
The only other thing on top of what Brother Tony just mentioned that I would like to add is that, you know, and it kind of speaks to what you said earlier, Christine. It's every single person here in the room, we're all here kind of for reasons, and we all have our own individual motivations, but there's work for every single person in this room to do that nobody else can do. You know, I mean, Dr. Choctaw, I love him. I work with this man every single day. But there are things that I can do that he can't do and vice versa. And same with, you know, Brother Wheeler and all of these other folks. So find your place and add your voice, and you know, don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Just do your own thing.